There we go. Buenos dias, buenos tardes, good evening, everybody. It's your main man, Shannon, and welcome to Car Chronicles, the road trip. And today in the car with us, we got a good friend of mine. He is an entrepreneur, a philanthropist, a community leader, an artist, a musician. Dude does it all, and he sings regulator a cappella. My good friend Eddie Booz. Eddie, welcome to the podcast. How we doing this morning?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much, and thank you for that kind intro. I really appreciate such kind words. It's really nice. Thank you.
I don't think people know. Guys, Eddie, we were connected. I do a ton of stuff in the community, and Eddie actually performed at my wife's birthday party a few years ago. But we know a ton of the same people. Eddie, tell us a little bit about yourself.
So, first and foremost, I'm a composer. I'm a songwriter. I started playing music around the time I was about 16 or 17, and I've been writing. I put out about 9 albums of my own original music. You can find all those on my website. I have those all for free for download on eddiebooz.com. As well, I've wrote music for film and television. And about 10 years ago, I started a nonprofit organization that teaches kids how to write music. And then most recently, we've moved over to working with adults with developmental disabilities. That's most recent. And my father and I started a nonprofit organization about a year ago called Universal Veterans Organization. That's also helping veterans obtain their disabilities benefits, paperwork, Social Security, legal advice, loans, anything that they need. So I have 2 nonprofit organizations. One is that, and the other is the Arts and Enrichment Academy, which is the one we do music with kids and adults, actually all ages and all abilities.
Real quick, it's funny you talk about that. And you guys that watch the podcast, remember Matt Wilson from a couple of episodes ago, good friend of mine, Matt Wilson, that he was a veteran. He was a military intelligence officer. Then he was training to become a Navy SEAL. Then 9/11 hit. And it's, I don't think we jump into this quickly with all the stuff you do, but you said something that it raised an eyebrow. Like, you're a proponent for veteran care. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. So two main things happened in my life that made me realize how big of a need it was to just help connect the dots for veterans. One was a friend of mine. I kind of randomly, I was, my local liquor store around the corner from me is called Mark's Liquor. And I would go in and out of there all the time. And I saw this guy, he was kind of an older gentleman, and he worked there kind of mopping the floors and stuff. And one day I got to talking to him. He was kind of feeling low, and he was standing outside. And so we got to talking, and, he was telling me his situation and his story, and he just lost his cousin, which was the only person he really had in his life. And, he told me he was a veteran, and he was, pretty much down on his luck, and he was getting evicted from his house and stuff. And so I actually let him stay with me for a little while, and I kind of helped him walk through some of this stuff to get him housed. And we did. It was crazy. It took a while, but we got him housed with the West LA VA, and it kind of progressed from there. And he started to get on his feet, and my father actually became homeless, as well, in some time after that. And same thing, my father and I kind of teamed up. He kind of stayed at my place, and for a little bit after he was homeless, and we teamed up and kind of got our feet under us, and just kind of got him the necessary resources to get him into a home and get his disability benefits. I mean, he had nothing at the time, and it took. I mean, it was so arduous of a process, and it was so many moving parts that I realized that no way. It's almost impossible. It was almost impossible for me to figure it all out, let alone a 75-year-old veteran of Vietnam War, who was in a wartime disaster, on the USS Enterprise, just had major like PTSD. How's he gonna navigate the internet and all of the necessary flaming hoops you have to jump through, that the government makes you jump through to get any of these resources? And make no mistake about it, there are a ton of resources out there. Most of them are private resources. Most of them are like private organizations that help veterans out. but there are a lot of government resources out there. But there are resources, but a lot of these veterans have no idea how to actually obtain those resources, said resources. They don't know how to obtain their disability benefits, and a lot of them have been denied more than once for their disability benefits in the first place. And sometimes that's just a formality. They get denied on some sort of weird formality. Legal help, they don't have legal help. They don't have veterinarian assistance. They don't have furniture. Like, I mean, anything that these veterans need, it's like it's so insanely difficult for them to obtain a lot of these resources. And I'll be honest with you, like the very first time, like I went with my father to the VA to have him to get help with the VASH program, which is the assisted housing for veterans. I was in the meeting with him, and they said, he stated, I've been homeless, and they said, well, have you been homeless, for a full year, which he hadn't, and it was close, but and he said he was honest with them, and they said, well, we can't give you any assistance unless you've been completely homeless for a full year. And that's like, I was like, why do we draw these? I mean, I understand there's got to be some sort of, there's got to be some factors here that you take into account here. But I mean, if we're basing this on a year, like, or things along these lines, I'm just saying, my point is that they don't make it easy for these veterans to go through the process of getting these resources. So that's where we come in. So that's where I decided to talk to my father about this, and I said, man, was so difficult. Like, we should help veterans be a hub to obtain these resources. And I feel that there are tons of resources out there, but I feel that it's very difficult for a lot of veterans to obtain them. And I feel like that the process sometimes can be so strenuous that it sometimes can it can be, it can push them away from it. One or two no's, and you give up. Sometimes you just say, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to try. So
now think about this, because not to cut you off, but she said something that, so you helped your dad through this. We live in California, the 5th largest economy in the world.
Yeah.
And my organization, Helping Hands Giving Hope, one of the things we do is homeless care. And if you look at it in the state of California, in the United States, veterans represent the 2nd largest homeless population. It's unbelievable to think that. To hear you talk about VASH and some of those organizations, many of you that know, my father-in-law is a retired master sergeant from the Air Force and the Army. He's 88 now, but he struggles with dementia. And for the last year and a half, we've been working to try to get VA resources to help they live in Arizona, to help my mother-in-law. And it's funny because they ask, my wife calls to start this process for him, and they said, well, does he go to the restroom on himself? Like, does he have issues with incontinence? Like, the guy, we've told you the struggles, but you have to check all of these boxes, to your point. So when you think about, veteran assistance, resources that are available, I'm gonna ask you a somewhat charged question. What do you think the last 2 administrations have done to kind of help veterans and ease some of this pain?
I can't tell. I couldn't tell you, actually. I couldn't, I'm going to be honest with you. Like, I know that my father ended up getting his help under Trump, under the Trump administration, he had attempted, to get his disability benefits for years prior. Right. So I will say that avenues did become less strenuous under the Trump administration, and that's just from my anecdotal experiences of what I went through with my father. Knowing that, but I am not as educated on what Trump did with veterans as I probably should be. So I couldn't really speak to it too much. And I don't want to misspeak. I don't want to misrepresent something, and say, it was, this happened or it was better under, under somebody,
But
because I actually don't know that particular.
but what you said makes sense because you said that he tried under previous administrations.
Yes,
Like Trump hasn't
correct.
went. It's not the only administration. It's Biden after him. It's Obama before him. Bush before him. So I would
Right.
assume your dad's been a veteran for a long time. So he
Yeah.
has seen the lack of veteran resources. Even my dad was a veteran, and so even as of recently, we've worked with procuring certain veteran benefits for him, and it's just it's near impossible.
It's
Some of the
near
things that they ask for.
impossible. It's absolutely hard, Shannon, and that's why my father and I discussed this. And how many psychiatrists and psychologists my dad had to go see. You remember how you were telling, just like you talked about, how does your dad have incontinence? Does he go to the bathroom on himself? Like, how many times do you have to run through these very, very particular things that should be not only like communicated from doctor to doctor, but written in their charts?
Right.
I mean, are we doing this from scratch every single time? And how many hands does this have to go through before somebody gets help? You know what I'm saying? How many avenues have to process the paperwork? And then how many other doctors and the next network have to be seen? And then from that, you know what I'm saying? Like, it really feels like to me, it feels like a lot of bureaucracy that's unnecessary, and that leads to a lot of um, I feel like it leads to a lot of people throwing their hands up and saying, I just can't do this anymore.
Right.
Why? Why would I keep trying to do this? It's almost like they're intentionally making this as difficult as humanly possible, so people just go away, so people stop trying to access the resources.
And when I think about even my dad recently, he went back and forth with the VA, and they said, "Well, you have any enlistment information?" He was like, I went in the Navy in October of 1959. I was 17 years old. Where would I have this needed information at? How would I get this?" And they went
Right.
back and forth with him, and I think he had a copy of his DD 214, but he didn't have anything else. Like
That's
there
all
was
you need. That's all you need now. And apparently, if you don't have your DD 214, it's super difficult to obtain. But there is, with my father and I, after months and months and months of trying, we found a actual place at the West LA VA that you can actually walk into an office and request and get your DD 214 day of.
and if
So
I'm not mistaken, I think the West LA VA is the second largest VA in the country.
I think something along those lines. I'm actually not too sure, but I know it's really big. And the housing facility they have there for veterans is huge, huge. I've been there a number of times with my father and with my other friend Tom, who I helped get into housing over there.
So
So it's very cool.
as we think about this, and as we think about kind of the biggest challenge facing veterans, it's access to information. The Bible talks about that. The Bible talks about
Absolutely.
when the
No,
Bible
I
talks about my people being destroyed for lack of knowledge. It's not like they rejected knowledge, but you can be destroyed if you don't have knowledge available to you.
right.
And it's like this secret scroll of information that you have to even access what you should be able to access.
Yeah,
Um,
I think that what you just said is applies across the board. I don't think it's just I think what you said is what you just said applies to everybody. I think that having access to real information is important, and I don't think that, I'll be completely honest with you, Shannon, I'm not wholly sure that the public is getting access to honest information on a regular basis from our own media and our own journalism. We can see it in real time, happening in real time, and I'm just adding that to the fact that in these situations and times where it's extremely difficult for people to obtain resources for themselves, it's also equally difficult for regular people to obtain. It's getting increasingly more difficult for regular people to obtain regular resources for themselves as well.
Wow.
and a lot of the information that comes out, is often tends to be one-sided, and kind of paints, it paints a certain picture, you know, and I don't think that the American people are getting as much honest information as we should be, or maybe used to get from our journalists. I think maybe a while ago they were held to a higher standard. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean it's I went to Arizona State University, and I know, like, outside of the business building, there was the Walter Cronkite School of Journalism. I think about that, like,
I've heard of that.
what's the difference between that, the journalistic integrity that occurred then versus what we see today, or versus what we're told today, what we're told to
Right.
believe today, regardless of how or what you believe. And I tell people
Absolutely.
this. I tell people this all the time. I said, look, it's whether you're left or right. The fact is it's almost like the birds of a feather are two sides of the same coin. You better figure out what you believe and rock with that. Um,
Sure.
when I look at veterans, I think it bothers me most that I think we as a society are okay with veteran care being marginalized, and even the care of migrant care, as we've seen a shift in society towards that, or other refugee care, other care, but we continue to discount the care of veterans long term. Um, when you look at the access of information, you also said something that was kind of shocking. You said that it was almost as if they don't want you to have the information,
I
and
mean,
we still
you
haven't
know,
gotten help from my father-in-law. I mean, we're just now starting to get the assistance that he needs, but it took him seeing 4 additional doctors to say, yeah, he has an onset of dementia. Well, we told you that a year ago.
4 additional doctors.
Yeah.
4 additional doctors. They imagine that. Imagine that they put you guys through that. So 4 additional doctors could get a paycheck just to make sure that your dad had the care that he needed. I don't think that's necessary. I think one medical professional that's trusted and in his industry, in his or her industry, should be able to make that diagnosis and treat. Shouldn't take 4 more than the initial a year later.
As a matter of fact, I don't even think it was a VA doctor that made the final diagnosis.
That's same with my dad. It was the same with my dad. They had to send him to a private outside to make the final diagnosis on his PTSD for him to get his disability benefits. Yeah, same.
No, and did he
And
did he end
no,
up being
please,
100% disabled?
yes, yeah. He was on the USS Enterprise in Vietnam when it exploded.
Wow.
Um, yeah, there was an error on deck. If I remember the story correctly, someone left a tractor close enough to propane, and
Wow.
it exploded, and it sent a series of explosions down the ship. My dad was actually walking back up towards the initial explosion and got blown back. Yeah, my dad was very fortunate to survive, and has some absolute incredible stories of heroism from that day that just like chill me to the bone. Just people like helping each other do amazing things, or doing things and sacrificing themselves for other people to live that day and stuff. So he saw some pretty amazingly horrific things and some amazingly heroic things all at the same time. And so yeah, um he's been through some stuff, man, I'll tell you.
Now, we've talked about one nonprofit that you've helped found. Let's talk about the other, of bringing the gift of music.
Sure. Before we do that, I wanted to touch on one thing we talked about journalistic integrity.
Uh,
You actually asked a question I didn't get to answer. You said, what's the difference between then and now? What are the differences? Or we were discussing the differences, and I wanted them to touch on one thing. One thing that people might want to, speaking about information, one thing that people might want to go look into is the Smith-Mundt Act. It was about 2012, 2013, and what that was back in the World War II days when Nazi Germany was using the propaganda that they were to manipulate the masses. After that happened, and after the Nuremberg trials happened, we decided that we were going to make that illegal here in the United States, to knowingly publish false information as a journalist. Unfortunately, and also to make it illegal to have state-sponsored media. So the government can't actually pay the news to say what they want them to say. You know what I'm saying? So that was actually made illegal, which, I mean, seems like a legitimate, seems like a legitimate thing. You know what I mean? Like, seeing what happened. You know what I mean? And in 2012 and 2013, the Smith-Mundt Act actually reversed that law. So at those times, you actually started hearing, remember when you started hearing the term fake news around 2014, 2015 or so? Yeah. That was right after the law that held journalists accountable for knowingly publishing false information was repealed. At the same time, it was also made legal that the state could also sponsor media again. So just letting you know that might be kind of some of the shifting points that may have happened legally, at least over the last decade or so. So,
well, it's funny that you and now that you've brought that up, before we go on to the music thing, because I was listening to Mosh Toure. He's a guy, you might want to check him out. He runs an organization called Black Guns Matter, and it's an organization
I the organization, but not the gentleman.
Yeah, and so they do a ton of different things. A lot of it is constitutional awareness, but he runs courses on situational awareness and conflict resolution, diffusing situations, firearm ownership. He's in Philadelphia doing a number of classes, but he talks about knowing your constitutional rights and living according to those rights. And then, when the government infringes upon those rights, being willing to say, hey, this is, I think Ronald Reagan talked about it in great detail. He would always talk about, and I'm not a huge Ronald Reagan fan because of some of the things he did with, allowing drugs into the community, but he talked about, having small government. And so someone asked me a couple of days ago, they go, hey, why do you need a gun like that? And I said, well, because the Constitution says I can have a gun like that. And she goes, well, don't you think that's overkill? And I said, I would have a Sherman tank in my front yard if the HOA rules would allow it. If I can get a tank in the front yard, I'd have one, just because that's my right to have. But I think it's understanding, the freedom of expression, under the First Amendment, but also, freedom of religion, the government's role and to be able to censor my freedom. All of this stuff, it starts to line up. And as we are in this, I call it the selection season, and people go, the election season. I said, no, I call it, this is the great selection. Whether you're left or right, whatever people believe is what they believe. But I can tell you that what we've seen over the last 20 years, it's not regular people flourishing.
No.
So we haven't just had one representative of House and Senate in the last 20 years. There's been a number of different, it's flip-flopped. We've had, far left presidents, far right presidents, and it's the life of the people has been the same, which leads me to believe that it's probably not in the government's best interest that the people are flourishing. Because if they would, people would be flourishing.
Well, I mean, look at home ownership, interest rates, grocery prices, gas prices, things along these lines nationwide. It's, if people were flourishing, the things would be there. The average Joe would have purchasing power.
Right.
That's one major signal of flourishment. And that's not a thing currently, in our current situation.
I mean, I think I read something a couple of days ago about the purchasing power of a U.S. dollar in the state of California is like 88 cents. So when you think about that, it may be different for people that don't live in the fifth largest economy in the world. Maybe life is different for us because we do live in the fifth largest economy in the world. We do have, there's laws and things that happen here. We pay an extremely high gas tax and all of these other things that people don't question because the weather's good.
Well, they vote for it. I'm just so we're all on the same page here. I don't think a lot of California voters are even aware that we voted for that $1.50 plus tax on our gas that's over the national average. We voted for that. We voted to have that. In fact, not sure if you know, but a few years ago, a guy, I can't remember who, Carl, oh, I can't remember his name. The guy who went down to San Diego and got a couple of million signatures to have that to put a measure on the ballot to remove the California gas tax and never allow them to try it again. And instead of and when they got it on the ballot, because it had to go, because they got enough signatures, they got enough leverage behind it to go. When they got it on the ballot, the Secretary of State at the time, he worded it as, because that's what the Secretary. So
right.
They're responsible for the verbiage on the legislature. So they didn't put it as repeal the gas tax. They put it as takes away money from civil engineering and certain other things where the money was going. So essentially it shaped people's opinion before it even told at the bottom of this thing that the gas tax was going to be repealed. So people had no clue, and they just instantly, ate it right up, because people will vote based on the title of a measure instead of reading the measure. Yeah. It's the same thing as the headline voters. You'll see a headline, boom, and instead of like going and actually reading the story or getting the information, or even, and this is the worst part. The worst part is really not being capable or willing to analyze and parse raw data. Analyzing and parsing raw data is a lost art, and it's a lost necessity if we want to be properly informed individuals in the United States of America today, because unfortunately, we don't get everything laid out on a silver platter for it.
Now, as we transition from our tinfoil, you and I are both tinfoil conspiracy theorists, because that's what people say. I mean, they go, "Oh, you must be a conspiracy theorist." I'm like, "Yeah, that's a government coined term, also." But we talked about the music, because that's kind of how we first met. Is sure. the music. But you've taken it a step further, not just to teach music or to perform music, but for you to now teach music.
Sure.
Walk me through that.
So, okay. So I'll give you, okay. So when I very first started doing this, I was in my 20s and I needed a job. It was in my early 20s and I just needed a job. So I called a friend of mine who I knew worked in after school programming. And he said, "Yeah, come work with me. I'll get you a job." So I went over and started working at John Muir Elementary School. And I was program leader for the third graders. It was my very first job. I was probably 22 years old. It was my very first job working with after school programming, not my very first job. I was working before that. But anyway, so I went over there and started working, and it was essentially, to me, it felt like a glorified babysitting program. It was like a half hour of sign in, an hour of homework help where we just, make sure the kids did their homework, and an hour of like recess, pretty much just free play, and then a half hour of sign out, and for about 2 weeks of that, I was just like, man, this is boring. And it was just a 3-hour thing, but I had to go an hour early and stay an hour late. So it was a 5-hour day. It was a part-time job. And I told my boss one day, I said, "You mind if I bring my guitar in and write some songs with these kids, or do some music?" Didn't even think about writing them yet. And he said, "No, that'd be great. Come on, bring, it sounds good." So I brought my guitar in, and on Mondays and Wednesdays, I started doing music with the kids. And on Tuesdays and Thursdays, I started doing chess with the kids, like in that hour of time, instead of like free play. We would like do actually something structured, And about a week went by, and I looked at the kids. I said, "Man, I'm a songwriter. Do you guys want to write a song together?" And the kids were like, yeah, let's write a song. So we wrote a song. And I kind of walked them through the fundamentals. I just kind of winged it. I was like, we went through all the fundamentals of like how to write a song, and we pieced a song together. And it was actually a really good song. It actually ended up becoming a really cool, it was called "I Will Succeed." And we sang it for an assembly at the elementary school. And the principal saw it, and she came up and she was like, "That's wonderful. And would you teach our 5th graders that song so they could sing it at our graduating ceremony?" And I was like, "Yeah," and as the wheels started turning, and I started thinking, man, this isn't just a one-time thing. Like like something happened here. Like I kind of captured magic in a bottle with this, And I was like, all right, cool. So so I started the curriculum, and I just started going into when I still worked at Campfire USA. I just started going and to different schools that they had and running this curriculum. And about a year or so that went by, and I moved into a more managerial position for another company with after school programming. And I didn't run the program for a few years. I didn't run any music programs. I was just performing and touring and things like that. And I got a phone call one day from my very first boss, UL Harper, who's also an amazing author, by the way. And he called me and he goes, "Hey man, I was thinking about it. We should start our own nonprofit organization." And I said, "Dude, I got the curriculum. Let's do my music program." And he was like, "Done." He was like, "Let's go." So almost overnight, we were running at like 5 middle schools because we had the connections with after school program nonprofit organizations who were already running in the rap program in Long Beach. So we just went directly to them and said, "Here's our curriculum. Here's how much it costs. You guys want our services or not?" And a lot of these nonprofit organizations that do serve after school programming, they have auxiliary funding for third party vendors along the lines of what we were doing. And so they said, "Yeah, come on in, let's do this." So we started running programs at Marshall Middle School, Lindbergh, Franklin, and a couple other schools. And we wrote a bunch of songs with the kids at those schools over a year or two's period, and it really went great. And you know things happen, and contracts come and go, you slow down, and then the lockdowns happen, and then once that happened, it really kind of just put a real stop to everything. I mean, obviously there was nothing running no school, and nobody was sending, their kids to, do fun music programs, so so when we got up and running again once this stopped. But also I realized I didn't even give you a brief description of what it is we do. I mean, I told you how it is what we do, but essentially what we do is we take a group of like 15 kids or so, and we teach them all about the fundamentals of music. We teach them all about genres and tempo and all kinds of things, and then we write a song with them. We bring a real audio engineer and recording studio into the school. The kids get to record the song that they wrote in a professional environment, and singing it or playing instruments or whatever. And then they get to and we do a music video, so music video releases on YouTube. The song releases on YouTube as well as Spotify and other streaming services. And then we do a performance at the end of that too, so the kids get to perform at the end of the semester in front of their friends and families and peers and the public. It's open to the public, so it's very, very fun, very engaging. It's like being on a baseball team or football team, but instead we're doing music. It's 2 nights a week, and we do a big performance at the end, and it's very, very cool.
Man, now, yeah, I didn't know it was that involved.
Yeah,
and you do that all along.
Dude, go to our YouTube channel. It's the Arts and Enrichment Academy, and it's a black and white cassette, and it just says the Arts and Enrichment Academy. That's our logo. Go check it. Like, we've been the program is amazing. The kids come up with the most amazing ideas. It's crazy. The songwriting is hard. Songwriting is not easy. That's why there's a thing called writer's block. You know what I'm saying? Like, songwriting is not easy. If it was, everyone would do it. But these kids, they start getting into this, and they lose their inhibitions when they start getting comfortable with each other and the group, and they start throwing out these ideas that just like, it blows your mind. Like, go listen to the song, particularly "I Love My Pets." That was written by like middle schoolers. Okay, the lyrics to that song are hilarious. So I'm telling you, these kids it's something about it. It's something, maybe it's that they're young, but I don't know. Even people who are older, the songs that they write are fantastic, and the way that it engages with people. Like, we've had the very, very first time we started working with anyone with special needs was a group of children with special needs who were middle school age. And one of those kids was fairly nonverbal going into our program. And when we were about halfway through, his mom came and asked me, "Hey, what are you guys doing here?" And I was like, "Why?" I was like, "I thought we were in trouble." I was like, "Oh, why? Like, did we do something wrong?" And she was like, No, like, my son is singing at home. like around the house, like he's like singing and stuff. And now he asked me if he could DJ his cousin's birthday party. He's like,
No
my
way.
son barely even talks, doesn't want to be the center of attention, and now he's singing around the house, and he wants to be the center of attention with music. And she's like, and he came and sang a solo at our performance. He like blossomed. I mean, I've seen music do things to kids that I can't explain what it does. I can't explain what or how. I just music and art in its purest forms of letting kids literally like do their thing, like actually like come up with the songs and write and like have a creative outlet through that, and guiding that and just being able to kind of like guide it, and make sure that it comes, mold it as it goes. It's something else, man. It's something else.
It's almost, they've taken it and made it their own. Music and me. Shout out Nate Dogg, R.I.P. Nate Dogg. That's it. Man. Now that is a game changer to hear that, because
Totally.
you look at, so guys, real quick. So that a few years ago, I got connected with Eddie. We know a ton of the same people. I think good people try to know other good people, and he's saying regulator at my wife. No, he's saying regulator, and then I think he was saying baby got back.
No, I think I did What's My Name from Snoop Dogg, and
Yes.
I might have done an NWA tune too, or something along those lines.
I think I think you did Straight Outta Compton on the guitar.
Something that, yeah. So I do a lot of that. Actually, when the lockdowns were happening, I supplemented a lot of my income by doing live streams on YouTube a couple nights a week. I would put a list up of 400 songs, like kind of like I did at your party. I had that list out. I put a list up in the comment section of 400 songs, and I'd have people watch and tip me. And yeah, I mean, just playing a couple nights a week on YouTube really helped, pay the bills here when things were down. But yeah, I play all kinds of music from all kinds of genres. When I was about 18 years old, I sat with a friend of mine and for an entire summer just learned every song on the radio, and this is back before the internet. So I had to write it all down, write the chords and write the lyrics and stuff, but it ingrained them in my head. Doing that just like, what I mean, solidified the knowledge, So I've been playing all these songs ever since. It's a blast.
Now, what else do you play besides the guitar?
So I play most stringed instruments: bass, mandolin, banjo, ukulele. I don't play any bowed instruments, unfortunately. I'd love to learn. I started on sax, alto sax, my very first instrument. I play a little piano, dabble, and I can play drums fairly efficiently as well.
So you met my daughter years ago, and so she takes piano lessons because we homeschool, and so she's on with this guy, Mr. Dave, and Mr. Dave is a piano teacher, but he has this idea of, hey, he worked at Disney, so he'll say, "What's your favorite Disney movie?" And then he'll teach them the songs from that movie.
That's
So
cool.
we have a guitar here, and so one day she says, "I'm going to teach myself to play the guitar," and so we're like, whatever. So she messed around a little bit, but I bought her a ukulele for Christmas because she was like, "I'm going to learn the ukulele." Like, okay. So she taught herself the ukulele, and then she teaches herself the guitar. And so, guys, here's a quick lesson in prayer. And so she comes to me one day and she goes, "I want a drum set. I'm going to teach myself the drums." And I was like, "Well, ain't nobody buying a drum set. Like you charge I pay a piano teacher. You got a ukulele. You have a guitar. We're not even paying for guitar lessons. You're just kind of teaching yourself off YouTube." And so she's like, "Well," and she's 11, and so she goes, "Nope, I'm gonna."
11?
Yes, so she goes, "I'm gonna learn how to play the drums." I said, "Well, where are you gonna get a drum set from?" And she goes, "I've been praying to the Lord for drums." It's like, well, whatever, whatever. And so we leave, and I go speak at a church on New Year's Eve. This past New Year's Eve, 2023 into 2024. So afterwards, I'm talking to the pastor, and she's talking to their worship leader. They're just kind of just BSing with each other. And so he goes, "Ava, honey, would you happen, this is going to sound strange, but would you want a set of drums? Because I have a set of drums that I can give you."
Wow.
So she was like,
Out of the blue, he just asked her.
yes. And so we picked the drums up a couple of weeks ago. Well, I think I got to buy a hi-hat and a pedal and a snare drum, but that's it.
Yeah.
She has the rest of the kit.
that reminds me of Matthew 7:7. I believe it's um, knock and it shall be opened unto you. Seek and you
Yeah,
shall find. Is
ask.
that
Yeah,
Matthew 7:7?
yeah, yeah.
Okay, I wasn't sure, but that's she asked, she got, man. The Lord came through. Wow.
But
And
it's really an
that
eye
doesn't
opener.
surprise me in the slightest, by the way. It doesn't surprise me in the slightest.
But it's an eye opener to hear you talk about music and its impact on the young minds. Like it's amazing just to hear her like catch something and go, okay, let me see if I can play this with no limitations. No one telling her she can't. Hey, let me just grab this ukulele. We had my son at his varsity basketball team. They had uh, an island night last year for basketball. So they do a theme snack bar night. And so she played the ukulele while people were in line and just would walk around playing the ukulele for folks. Just
That is
random strokes.
cool.
Yeah, it's been a blessing to see kind of how that has opened her eyes to things. But to hear you talk about this, it really gives me some insight as how music can be used as as a gateway for people that are stuck with certain situations.
It's crazy. Like the therapeutic like values that music, and not just music, but like bass frequency has on people. For instance, like everybody can attest to this. Tell me there's not a song out there or like some music out there that you've heard that whenever you hear it, the hair on your arm stand up and
Yeah,
like you get goosebumps because it does something to your biochemistry. It's not like oh, I love this song. It's not in your head. It's in your DNA. It's literally in your body. Like it's something about the way that the frequency is resonating with your being and your molecules is music does something to you. And when you start to be able to connect with that on like when you can actually start to connect that experience intellectually, intelligently, kinetic, like on a kinetic level, it's like you're tapping into the source, it's like you're tapping into like the gifts that God has given us, on a level that I can't really explain.
I think also it's we can we can prescribe that music to something. It's associated with a time of life. It's associated with an experience.
Totally.
Yeah, we can say, hey, I remember the first time that. I remember the first time when. Hey, it's funny because I was telling somebody recently that the Anita Baker song Angel. I think that song came out in like 1984 or 85. Here's what I remember about that though. I remember that when that song came on, if my parents had people over, if that record was put on, that was like the start of like grown folks are talking, you had to get up out of here. So it's like, these kids don't know a lot about that these days, but there's things that you can remember when these the Smokey Robinson song "I Love Your Face." I remember that song because that was a song that my mother would always like. She liked that song for some reason, and it was I could assign a time of life where I was like, oh, that song meant something. Those words meant something. That melody meant something. So as you talk about therapy and music, I wonder what impact that your music treatment could have on older people that are facing developmental issues.
That's a really actually a great question that I would like to see answered in real time. I've been kicking around the idea of doing this with seniors as well recently. Um, and I would love the opportunity to jump into exploring that realistically.
Yeah,
I
because I
haven't
mean
had the
some of the
chance to, but I would like to. And speaking with some people in Carson about working with some of their elderly groups out there.
yeah,
So
because
it'll
the
be
city
nice.
of Carson has a phenomenal elder and senior care program.
Oh yes, they do. I know absolutely they do.
And when I look at even like what the current mayor Lula Davis and what her team has done to kind of care for the seniors, man, it's unmatched in the control compared with any city.
Yeah,
You know,
their team is incredible. I've actually worked closely with their senior team on a couple of different events over the last few years, and I've seen what they're capable of, and it's kind of blown my mind. They have some of the groups that they put together for their seniors. I can't remember the
Silver Sneakers.
Yes, like there's like a couple other ones that are just like, and the people that run those groups are some of the nicest, most charitable people I've ever met.
Yeah, it's the YMCA. I sit on the board of YMCA, and we had a Silver Sneakers program. But when I come to the YMCA during the daytime, it's amazing to see the seniors that are there, and that have a strong footprint in what we do as a YMCA. Because they'll be there in the morning, they'll be there sitting around in the afternoon sometimes when you come in, and I think it's the lost art of us, even the young people, being able to hear from the seniors, from the young people to be able to have exposure and interaction with the seniors. I think in the era in which and I grew up in a neighborhood, so we grew up in an environment where the seniors had a presence, and so I had the opportunity to hear from the OGs in the neighborhood and the old heads to see what they had to say and what their thought was, and it's kind of a lost art.
Yep. And when
I was talking about to somebody about this recently, that my grandfather was in Korea, in the Korean War. I was talking to a guy about this last Sunday at the gym, and he was in Vietnam. And so I said, like, I had cousins and people older than me. Nobody ever talked to my grandfather and figured out what the hell George Stewart was talking about. Like, I talked to him, and when I was like, whoa, this dude had crazy life experiences. But no one ever sat down and shut up long enough to hear what he had to say. Like, how farther along would we have been if people had really listened to what this dude had to say and what he had gone through? So, when I think about what you're doing, I'm thinking, just trying to even connect the dots. Like, man, I wonder how the YMCA seniors would benefit from that, or even like the local boys and girls clubs in the area. How would they benefit from that? Um,
everybody,
people talk about our.
it's the question is greatly, and everyone would. And here's something to consider. With the program that we've run, the actual program that we've run, we've had a 100% success rate and a 100% evaluation rate from parents, kids, administrators, principals. Everywhere that we've run, we have had every single person that we've run across, meaning every parent, every kid, every teacher, every administrator, every teacher's liaison that we've worked with has not only like been okay with, but totally approved what we do. When they come in and watch, or when they see the finished product, they look at it and they go, yes, because it positively affects everybody, from the child to the parent who is now having their child in amazing arts programs that actually are giving them ownership of a project-based enrichment activity. They're not just learning how to play an instrument. They're literally creating something that they're going to own for the rest of their lives. Every time they step into a classroom with us, we do this for a session. And a lot of the kids have been in our class for like 6-7 sessions. So they got like almost an album's worth of material that they've written.
Wow.
You know what I'm saying? Up to the parent, up to the taxpayers. So when Long Beach Unified School District was actually footing the bill for our programs, or when it was actually coming from taxpayers get to actually have their money go to legitimate arts programs getting put back in schools. Sorry to jump back over to the legal stuff, but Prop 47 just passed recently, and that's supposed to have arts. That was supposed to fund a ton of arts programs going back into schools. Right. And a lot of school districts in Southern California have been on fire recently because that Prop 47 money is still sitting there. So people are going, what? It's 2 years later.
Where'd that money go?
We're about to have another election now, and that money hasn't been spent. So when the taxpayers get to see that money getting spent on programs like this, when the principals at these schools get to have unique arts programming, thrust into their schools, the teachers liaisons who get in between the schools and our agency, everybody who's involved with this is on board. We've never had somebody go, not for us. We don't like this, I don't want my kid in this, you know what I mean? Unless it's like a time constraint issue or like transportation issue or something along those lines, most of our kids sign up and sign up and sign up and sign up, and they're in the program, and they've been in the program for years. Some of our kids have been in the program since they were in middle school and are now in the program as a young adult in their 20s.
No way.
Yes. And those kids are about to graduate from their programs, and we're just starting to enact a part of our program that's going to start hiring these kids. A lot of the special needs adults, young special needs adults coming out when they're graduating, we're going to hire them as assistants. Some of these kids who've been in our program for multiple years and really know what we do and how our program runs. So they're not only learning these skills, they're actually they're apprenticing for careers, for jobs. So we're doing our best to, put our best foot forward on like every single aspect of this into the community and follow through. I mean, literally follow through as much as humanly possible with all of our students, and doing what we can. So, but
So
yeah, we do have a lot of appreciation, and we have a lot of great relationships with those in the community.
so as you think about what we do here on the Car Chronicles, the road trip, the road trip, we say we do three things: we empower, we encourage, and then we embrace. And I always ask people this, and what's the when you look at yourself, the Eddie Booz today, and then the Eddie Booz say 20 years ago, what's the biggest change that you've seen?
I don't know. That's a good question. I think I need to give that some thought. Actually, you would think that in 20 years you'd be able to identify some growth, and you'd be able to identify, some sort of, I don't know, defining change or shift in your life, that may have made you better, or I don't know, more of a man, or I don't know, success. But
But then the challenge with that, what is success? I mean, I always think about that. Like people are like, oh, it's funny because I asked a buddy of mine this recently, and he talked about 20 years ago. He was like, well, I was in the military. So he was like, what I thought was success, he was like, it wasn't. He was like, but now being able to, enrich leaders or to being able to change lives, I think, I challenge people with that, particularly people like yourself that change lives. It is, it's something to be able to say, I did something that changed, that put a person in a different position tomorrow than they were in today. Or I've given a kid that was deemed special needs. Because here's the interesting thing about that. When as we continue to talk about the bureaucracy of things, who's to say who's special needs? Isn't it something like 45% of kids that are diagnosed with special needs aren't really special needs, but it's just the school district says they're special needs.
right,
It's funny. I look at the fight of the school district. If the school district wasn't such a big moneymaker, why is it? And again, guys, this is for those of us that live in the state of California. Every mayor of Los Angeles has worked to get control of the school district going back to before Villaraigosa was mayor. Why? Because not only the children aren't the future, the children are that's where the bag is secured. If you can get control of that, I mean, what didn't LAUSD get $1 billion in COVID relief? A billion with a B. Long Beach Unified got a $500 million, and they haven't put a doorknob on the school. Like, oh, they got some Prop 47 money. Where'd that money go? So when we think about, all right, let me ask you this, because I always ask people, particularly people that have done something or built something, what advice do you give the young person that comes up to you and go, Eddie, I think God's called me to do something, but I don't know where to get started.
Two things. I'll tell you two things. One, start anywhere, but start. Don't wait for an outline. The idea to you know, flesh itself out. Don't wait for somebody else to give you the okay or the thumbs up on that's a good idea. Just start. Do something. Do it. Just start. Start anywhere. Make it look as the best you can. Make it the best you can to start. But as you go, you'll shift, you'll organize, you'll rearrange, you'll make it better, and it'll get better, and it'll get better, and it'll get refined, and it'll get refined until it's what you wanted it to be in the first place. But if you never start, eventually life and all the other things in life will redirect you back into paying this bill and paying that bill and doing this and doing that. So start or you never will. Start. That's my first one. Number two, network properly. Network properly. Those are the two things I can give you are my best advice. Start anywhere and continue, and network properly. And I cannot say enough about networking properly. You can be the best at what you do. You can be the absolute best at what you do, but if you can't get along with people, if you can't be if you're not, if you can't be in a workable space for an extended period of time with others and have good, relationships with people. And if those are two things, but mainly find the people who are already in the position that you want to be in and ask them to walk you through it. Don't pay the dummy tax. Literally ask them, become friends with them, learn from them, go under their wing, ask them to be a mentor, ask them to invest in you. And a lot of times when you do that, when you make yourself an investment of somebody else, that they take it seriously. Especially if you do, network properly, find the people who are in the field that you want to be in, find the people who have already made the mistakes that you're about to make, do all of that, get around those people and spend as much time as humanly possible with those people. Network properly, because you can be the best at what you do, but you'll never succeed unless you're actually putting yourself in those circles.
Guys, it's funny. Eddie and I were talking about this before we came on camera, is the fact that I've been trying to do a podcast for a year, and I reached out to Eddie and he walked me through everything, and it was almost like a paralysis by analysis, where I was like overthinking it instead of just saying, all right, let's get somebody on Zoom and let's just figure it out and talk.
Yeah, start somewhere.
As I build the idea of a studio, but start somewhere. And it's funny, guys, as one that tell people this, because those of you that follow me, I tell people this on the philanthropic space when they say, Lord's called me to do something, where do I start? And I go, just start. And the Lord will make up the rest.
That's right.
Because you don't have a lot of time. Right. And you don't have a lot of time, but you do have a lot of time. And a lot of times people want it to be perfect. I think people start a podcast and they're like, oh, we want it to be like the Joe Rogan podcast. But Joe Rogan, that's even if you look back at his earlier podcasts, they didn't look like that.
Not even close. It was sitting in a bedroom with bad cameras and bad sound. That's how it all starts. It all starts bad. It's all bad at the beginning. Look at South Park. I mean, look at all of these things. They're just bad when they start, but they refine. As long as you stick with it, keep going. If you love it, keep going. The best thing you can do to make yourself successful is stay in business.
Whew. Hey, now I'll get you out of here on this question. What's next for you?
Shannon, I think over the next year or two, I think two main things right now that I'm focused on in my life right now. And I'll talk to you about something else, outside of this, another major situation that will be going on in my life soon that I may be having to undertake. But the two main things that I'm focused on right now in my life are the Arts and Enrichment Academy. We've just signed up a lot of kids. We've just started working with Harbor Regional Center, and we are really moving forward with a lot of growth over the last month or two. And it looks like things are going in a really positive direction with the Arts and Enrichment Academy. That's number one. So number one, I'm focused on the Arts and Enrichment Academy, probably more than anything else. Number two, I would say my original music. I'm back to that. For a long time I was paying my bills by playing restaurants and playing cover music at restaurants and bars and things like that. And I stopped doing that. I still play Tantalum is the only place I play. I love Tantalum. Fantastic food, great staff, just a great environment altogether. And I still play there every Tuesday at 6:30 to 9:30. So if anybody watches this wants to come out, I play a lot of blues, a lot of late 60s R&B, a lot of Otis, Sam Cooke, things like that. I stopped doing that and I started focusing on my original music. So my original music, I will be releasing a few albums later this year and early next year, a few different genres of music, projects I've been working on over the last year. And I'll be pushing into my original music harder than I probably ever have before. So those two things, the Arts and Enrichment Academy moving forward, as well as my original music. And I'll send you some of that if you want to maybe link a song. I'll send you an unreleased song. And if you want to link that for everybody to hear, you can.
And guys, I'll put all of Eddie's info in the description where you can link up with him, find out more about the Arts and Enrichment Academy, find out more about Eddie Boo's music and some of the things that he does. If you're having a party, a corporate event, if you want to serenade your wife, you've been out in these streets, you're back home, you want to serenade your wife, Eddie will come and he'll sing to her with his guitar. He'll play a fancy song. He does it all. So Eddie, on behalf of Car Chronicles, a road trip, I want to thank you for taking the time to join us today. I want to thank all of y'all that have taken time and listened and allowed us to do the 3 E's: to empower, to encourage, and to embrace. All right? I'm Shannon, Car Chronicles, Helping Hands, Giving Hope. I love you. God loves you. Till we speak again, keep living in victory. Have a great day, everybody.
Bye, guys.